Us real freight pilots, we just kind of, slow and smooth and steady, and we don't get too excited about things. Conservative Republican, I believe in a limited budget. I believe that we should follow the Constitution in all things. I believe in a constitutional spending cap. I believe that the people come first, that your vote is my vote. So how you want me to vote, regardless of how I feel about something, is how I will vote. I'm a firm believer in the Second Amendment. I believe that life begins at conception. I do believe in the First Amendment and your ability to speak to your government without hindrance. So those are some of the things that are my core beliefs. And as far as my record, in the last 2 years, I'm a freshman, so I'm ending up my first term. And in the last 2 years, we've been in the minority. Republicans have been in the minority. And we've had to work from that limitation. So a lot of what we do in the minority is obstruction. A lot of no votes, a lot of procedures to slow things down. That's what the minority is supposed to do. However, I did manage to pass one bill, I'm sorry. The front license plate bill, which will be signed next Wednesday at 3:45 at the Palmer DMV. So that actually got installed as an amendment thanks to Senator Hughes. It was a bill, but at the end of the day, we put it in as an amendment. So those of you that don't have a front license plate on your car, Shonda, you're now legal. And those of you that want to take it off after we sign this, you'll also be legal, and you won't have to have a front license plate anymore. It saved the state $332,000. Not much in the grand scheme of things, but when I got down there and started looking at things, I found out that we couldn't just wholesale cut the budget. We had to find efficiencies. This was an efficiency that a constituent recommended, and my staff and I put it forward and started looking at it and realized we could save some money, and that might be a pretty interesting way to do so. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to introduce my wife and my #1 fan, Lynn. She is... She's my campaign manager, and without her, I wouldn't know her. She's the political genius of the family. Everything I do, I bounce off her, just so you know. Also, behind Lynn is my chief of staff, Angie Steffel. So I'm fond of saying that there are 3 very strong women that have entered my life that have helped guide me in this last 2 years. And the other one, of course, is the minority leader, Cathy Tilton, who is among the finest servant leaders that I've ever worked for. She has kept us all together. 14 of the 16 of us have made an admirable team, and I think we are a core group ready to go forward into the majority. But it is very, very important that we get Republicans elected so that we can be in the majority. I had a discussion today, another Zoom meeting, podcast sort of meeting. And one of the things we talked about was how important the majority is when you're first forming the House. If you're not in the majority, if you're in the minority, you don't get the say in committees. You don't get a committee chair. The committee chairs, for those of you that don't know, are among the most powerful members in the House because they control the flow of the bills. You can put a bill in, it gets read across the floor, the speaker says, okay, Kevin, your license plate bill is going to go to the Transportation Committee, and I think we went to Community and Regional Affairs as well. So 2 committees, normally that's about normal. If she wants to kill a bill, she'll give it, or he, depending on the year, will give it 4 or 5 committees, and then it'll just die. But in the case of our license plate bill, it was 2 committees. We got it through the Transportation Committee, and it went to Community and Regional Affairs, where it was essentially dead because the CRA chairman didn't like the bill. So my point in saying this is it is of utmost importance that you get to the majority so the committee chairs are your caucus members. Then you get your bills heard in most cases. Sorry, Senator Schauer, but in most cases, when you have a caucus like we do, you get your bills heard and move it through committee. So one of the things that I said very early on is, it doesn't matter to me if you're a rhino or if you're a cat or a poodle, if you have an R after your name. When we're forming, I want you elected so that we can be a majority. So other than that, I don't have a whole lot of things to say. Right now we're focused on roads, of course. Big Lake Road, we're focused on that pretty continuously. We get, whenever it rains, it seems to grow potholes. So I've been working on that with the state DOT. A few other roads, Yoder Road up north. Lynn and I have been going to community council meetings. I think we counted 10 community council meetings now from the 3 that we had prior to that. So lots of travel, lots of campaigning, and the other thing that I'm going to mention before Senator Schauer gets up here and steals the whole thing is the Constitutional Convention. I'm sure he's going to talk about that. If you want a constitution, a hardback constitution, we can order them for you in our office, and several offices have done some. I think Shonda in Senator Schauer's office has some, and we would be happy to give those to you. The reason that is so important is in November, there will be a question on the ballot that says, do you want a constitutional convention? Yes or no? If you don't know what our Constitution says, then you can't really make an informed decision. And I could tell you, we could tell you all day long what the Constitution means and what it says and everything else, but nothing is a substitute for reading it. And so that's the reason I believe it's so important. The mayor, Edna DeVries, thinks it's important. She's holding that School of Government, and we've been discussing the Constitution. Pretty much every meeting they talk a little bit about the Constitution. So Senator Schauer has a very good discussion on it. I'm sure he'd be happy to talk about it. But don't ask him too many questions or we'll be here till midnight. So with that, anybody have any questions for me? Yes, sir.
What's this reports that I've been reading about you voted against the Second Amendment?
Okay, good question. So, as I mentioned, there are many, many ways to vote and many little nuances that go on the floor. So, this is being done to me, essentially to me, by a group of people that are not mad at me and they know what my stance is on the Second Amendment. They're not upset at me because of my stance on the Second Amendment. They're upset with me because I tabled a few amendments from Representative Eastman. Between Ben Carpenter and I think we tabled 11 amendments. That angered them, so they tried to find a way that they could attack me on something that I hold dear, which is the Second Amendment. So the way that went down is there was an Amendment 46 that Sarah Vance offered, that she wrote. And when it came time to offer it on the floor, she said, Amendment 46 will not be offered. And the speaker said, without objection, I will roll it to the bottom. We should have objected, nobody did, and it got rolled to the bottom. Christopher Kirka was a co-sponsor on that amendment. So the next day, Christopher Kirka offered that amendment. That's pretty unusual for a co-sponsor to offer an amendment that the original writer did not want offered. When he offered it, Ben Carpenter, Representative Carpenter, moved to table it. Sarah Vance voted to table it. It was her amendment and she voted to table it. And I just voted with Sarah. For that one single vote, they are saying that I am against the Second Amendment. So you can watch all that. I've written several articles about it. And unfortunately, the Alaska, I think it's called Alaska Gun Rights group has decided, and that's David Eastman's chief of staff. His father runs that. It's a guy named Rick McClure. Pat Martin is on the board. Jared McClure is on the board. They have decided that that's how they're going to attack me. So if you need proof of my Second Amendment, I'm happy to provide all those. I'm endorsed by Donna Anthony. I'm endorsed by several different gun rights groups. I'm pending an endorsement by the DC Project. So I'm not sure what else I can do to convince you that I'm a pro-Second Amendment. I don't believe the Second Amendment was put in there for hunting. I don't even think it was put in place to protect you and your family. I think the Second Amendment was put in place for us to protect ourselves from a tyrannical government. So, anyways, that's my explanation of that. It's unfortunate that this blew up into Facebook, but it is what it is, and I have to learn to deal with it. So that's.
I just figured it was a legitimate question, being that you were a Republican, and I want to make sure you weren't trying to be like Murkowski, a rhino.
No, I should. I appreciate that. No, I will always vote to defend the Second Amendment. The problem is they can easily take a procedural vote, and they can take one snapshot of a picture like that and say, here's how he voted. In fact, what they say is he voted with the Democrats. But if you really look at the picture, Sarah Vance voted with the Democrats, Ben Carpenter voted with the Democrats, and all we did was vote to table that amendment because Sarah didn't want it offered. So,
not you or anybody else, anybody that doesn't side with the Constitution is included.
no, I agree with
Whether
that.
you're right or left.
I totally agree with that. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
You mentioned Big Lake Road. I'm just curious, what's the status? Is it on STIP? Is it?
Yes, it's supposed to be repaved next summer. We are currently fighting. One of the very first things I did when I went down there is call the DOT and say, why is Big Lake Road a priority 3 for paving? It has, 5 or 6. Say that. I'm sorry, for plowing. Yeah. Thank you, campaign manager. Yeah. So why is it a priority 3 for snow plowing, essentially? Why are we waiting 24 hours to get snow plowing? And a road like the road from the interchange from the Old Glen to the bridge, which is 12 miles long, is a priority 2. It gets 1,200 cars an hour. We had 3,500 or 4,000 cars an hour. So I forced them to put car counters out there, and they did it in the middle of construction last summer. So I asked them to do it again this summer, and they decided to put the car counter this side of Kenlar. And I said, well, you're leaving out a whole big subdivision as well as Houston. So they removed that. They're supposed to put it back in there. The point being is I'm trying to get our car count up above 10,000, in which case they won't have any excuse. They'll have to put us in as a priority 2. How they replied to me my first year down there as a freshman, they said, well, Representative McCabe, we'd be happy to make it a priority 2 if you give us more money. And then we can hire people to plow it. And they didn't like my response when I said, well, maybe I'll take money away if I can, and then when you start plowing Big Lake Road, I'll give it back to you. That didn't sit very well with them. So we have a head-butting relationship, as do most reps with the DOT, but we'll solve it. It's going to be paved. And they're going to do, I'm not real sure why, but I think they're going to do Hollywood and Big Lake Road all together next summer. So, there was, yes, sir.
I got 2 questions. I'll make them as brief as possible. First one, the budget was raised $300 million permanently above what it had been the prior year before. How do you guys plan on paying that? Second question is, we became the 49th state in 1959. Part of our Constitution says we are to develop up our resources of our state to pay for ourselves. We currently have laws that we are not following that the federal government says that we are supposed to, and this is happening around our entire nation. Immigration is one of them, marijuana would be another, just for a couple of examples. Why are we not developing up our resources and ignoring the federal government telling us to not do that?
Well, I can answer that in one word: politics. I'll give you a classic example. Pebble Mine has not killed a single salmon yet. It's the most studied, permitted mine ever in history. And it hasn't killed one single salmon. Yet there is huge opposition to Pebble Mine from various groups around Alaska. And frankly, a lot of native groups, tribal groups on the Bristol Bay area are against the Pebble Mine. Yet, trawler bycatch, which is another resource, fish is an Alaskan resource, kills millions of salmon a year. The trawlers are owned by some of those very native groups that are against Pebble Mine. So the hypocrisy and the politics of it all are what are what are causing us not to be able to develop our resources. And then you add in outside money from the lower 48, or big money such as the McKinley Capital Group that went after Pebble Mine, and it becomes this big quagmire. And we are just, I mean, I'm one vote. I can talk, I can do whatever I can do, but with one vote, unless the people get up in arms, and the people, maybe the Constitutional Convention is how we need to do it, how we need to talk about our resources and the fact that we became a state. Congress was not going to let Alaska become a state because we didn't have enough people. They only allowed us to become a state after 10 years of negotiation because we had the resources to support ourselves, and now they won't let us support ourselves. And the eco-warriors that sue us continually and go after us for developing our own resources won't let us pay for ourselves. Alaskans do it better than anyone else on the planet. We develop our resources better than anyone else on the planet. Usabelli Mine is a classic example. We're going to go up there next week, and their reclamation project is an example for the rest of the world to see how you can responsibly steward a coal mine and how you can do things afterwards. We need to continue to do that. I have a friend who was fired from a company up on the North Slope because he crossed under the drain plug and leaked less than a quart of oil onto the gravel up there, and they fired him because he created an oil spill, an oil leak. That's the kind of stewardship that Alaskans have and that our companies have that are developing our resources, and I think we need to continue. And I'll fight to be able to develop all of our resources equitably. There shouldn't be any one resource that has a position above any other resource. We need all our resources developed, and that's what I'll fight to do. And I forgot the first question. Oh, the $300 million.
The $300 million, yes.
So, I don't know. Where is it coming from?
Well, they've reported negative profits for our permanent fund dividend for the first time since 2012. So that for the corpus and the ER being put into the ERA, that it's actually negative, and for the first time we've seen a loss since 2012. Since that's been the main sources for government to pay currently for the budget that they have, except for this past year. Where do they plan on when that big surplus of money is no longer there and they're back to having to rely upon taking the PFD? How is it going to be paid for?
So the PFD should never be part of the budget discussion. Alaskans, for 40 years, we had a PFD that was never part of it. It was a transfer. We didn't even consider it in the budget. It was not part of the budget. In my opinion, the PFD should never be talked about in the same sense as taxes. The PFD is on this side of the equation. Revenue and spending is on this side of the equation. If your revenue can't cover your spending, then you have a spending problem, and you have to solve your spending problem. So as far as the $300 million, I'm a little unaware of those figures. I know that we had $20 billion gain last year in the PFD, and I know it lost a lot in the last 6 months, essentially, in the stock market, but I'm not aware of the $300 million that you're talking about. So I'd have to look into it. Probably not a satisfying answer, but it is. It's the best I had. It's the best I got. Yes, sir.
How you doing? Brandon, we haven't met, but I just want to know, what's the rumor about the mine that's going in the road that we're building? It's like, what, 101 miles over across the Susitna? Who's pushing that? And if we're paying for it, I heard a rumor that it's going to be privatized. We're not going to be able to use it. Is that true or false?
So that's in its initial stages of development. Basically, they're looking at the project. They're doing their research and their due diligence. Nothing has been determined yet. We have made it very clear that the public needs to, if they build a road, the public needs to be able to access it. There might be occasions, depending on the road itself, where public access means you have to follow a pilot car, depending on how dangerous it is. And I just heard this yesterday, so I haven't been able to actually investigate exactly what they're talking about. There are several companies that are interested in the minerals, gold mine especially, in the minerals that they could access via that road. Currently, they're in exploration as well. They're not completely permitted and they're not started to mine yet. They're just drilling for exploration. And so it's all kind of in its infancy. It is 101 miles. It is, it's all in this district, actually, in District 30. And it will, if I have anything to do with it, if I have anything to say about it, it will be accessible by Alaskans or it won't be built. We have to be able, I mean,
It's our resource.
it's our resource, our fish, our moose, and yes, there is some opposition to it. There's some lodge owners up in that area that don't necessarily like that. I think there's 8 of them. And of course, the standard friends of this and friends of that have lined up against it as well. But I personally think it's a good idea. I think we haven't really built or explored any areas in a long time in Alaska, and again, we do it better than anyone else, and I think we should be able to do it without outside input from Iowa or New York or New Hampshire or anybody else. We need to decide. So, other questions? Wow, I got off easy. So with that, I'll introduce Senator Shower, who will talk for the next 2.5 hours or so. If anybody has a whiteboard in their car, he doesn't talk very well without a whiteboard. So I don't know if you've ever watched his Facebook Live events, but
standing behind podiums, and that's not a spirit, Kevin. When we have like town halls, I wish we had it backwards, because one of the things that is a big deal to me is public servants, and I think a lot of your public servants have become kings and queens. The way they view themselves, and they forgot what public service means, which we serve you, not the other way around. And we often sit up on the dais up here and we're looking down at people. I'd rather us be sitting down having you guys looking down upon us, because I think it reminds us of who we are and what our job is. We're there to serve and to listen. That doesn't happen necessarily. So since I'm new to this area, I'll do just a little bit of explanation. I'd like to answer questions because that's maybe more important to you on who I am, what I believe in, those kinds of things. So I'll tell you some of that just so that you know, and then we'll go from there. As Kevin has alluded to, I was a former fighter pilot. I'm now a FedEx pilot as a citizen legislature, because that's what we have. We have people that may be retired or wealthy. There are some of those, but many of us still have a job in the regular world. We live in the private sector. We have a private sector job, which I believe is very important, because that keeps us tied to you, because we come hear about the things people are struggling with. If you're retired, if you're wealthy, whatever, you're not really that connected to the community anymore. You can be disconnected. So I want you to hear a little bit about my background, but answer your questions and take time. I do talk fast. I try to slow down. I get in trouble all the time. That's a habit of mine. There's so much I want to tell you. I'm just like, I'm going 1,000,000 miles a minute. So if I'm too fast, slow me down, ask a question. If at any time you go, what about something, stop me and ask me. But who am I? So 54 years old. We've been Alaska residents since 1993. I'm a 24-year Air Force veteran. I flew F-15s, F-22s. As Kevin alluded to, now I'm a commercial pilot. I fly for FedEx when I'm not doing the citizen legislature gig. In 2018, I was appointed by the former Governor Walker when Dunleavy resigned the Senate seat to go run for governor. And then I'm the guy that people have heard about, the binding caucus. I was the guy fighting the binding caucus where they make you promise your vote. We're like, I'm not promising my vote for anything. So the day I showed up, I was already fighting the leadership and the kind of the old guard. It's just the way it played out. And we've got 3 kids, 3 grandkids. I've got to start off. I'm going to go even faster than Kevin did and introduce my wife, Michelle. She's the little short gal sitting up here with the phone and filming me. Also my chief of staff, also my counsel, everyone I can trust, right? So we've been together for 30-something years now. And I've got my staff I want to introduce as well. She'll say hi. She lives up in District here, Shonda, so Shonda's back there helping as well. And we've already said thanks to the law of atmosphere, but I appreciate it, because if we don't do this, we don't reach. This is the most important thing to me, is to have a chance to sit and talk, look people in the eyes, have you ask hard questions, and hold us accountable. Because if we don't come see you, I'm not accountable to you when you ask questions, whether that's on social media, whether that's on an email to us, or in person. And something we have missed for the last 2 years, unfortunately, is a lot of personal contact. Because we were going all over the place in 2018 and 2019, Because we went to Valdez like 10 times, even though I've heard the story from some people saying, he doesn't go to Valdez. We've been there a bunch. We go there every year. All right, so the problem we had in 2020 was it shut us down, COVID, nobody wanted to meet. So we didn't see anybody. And we all kind of hid in our houses. And then in 2021, the Delta surge came, so we didn't see people either. This is wonderful to be back out because most people are tired of COVID, so we're actually seeing people in person, shaking hands, looking them in the eyes. This is very important to what we do. And it's one of the reasons why another bill I filed, because I've got plenty, one of them was to move, everybody says the Capitol, and I try to educate people, don't say move the Capitol, you need to move the legislative session. Because the Capitol can stay in Juneau, that's fine. People's done their jobs and it generates a lot of opposition when you say move the Capitol. We don't need to do that. What we need to do is to have your legislators available to you, or during the session, you can show up in mass and get mad at us and yell at us about stuff and hold us accountable. You want to go to Juneau to talk to your legislative sessions? It's going to cost you $1,000 or more by the time you fly there, get a car, do whatever you got to do. Or we can have it in Anchorage where you can hop in your car and drive 50 minutes and you can talk to us all day long and hold us accountable. And it would save us a ton of money. Did you know that that 33 of your 60 legislators, if we held this in the master Anchorage, would not get per diem, would not get moving expenses, travel, anything else. It would save us several $1 million a year just starting to hold the legislative session for 3 or 4 months in Anchorage. We don't have to do anything else. We don't have to change the law. We could just do it. That's just one small thing. A little bit more about myself as far as my position. Like Kevin, I'm a Republican, although I will be very honest about that. For a couple of years before that, Michelle and I were undeclared, because from 18 to like 45, I was Republican. I'm a very conservative guy. I'm a Christian. I'm unapologetic in my faith, et cetera, et cetera. But we did go undeclared for a couple of years because we were tired of partisan politics, mostly at the national level. We were tired of being told how I could vote. And then in 2018, when I got appointed by Walker, I just gotten back into the party, and that whole thing is a long story. I won't tell it. We'll be here for 30 minutes for just that story. Because from a Friday morning to a Monday night, so I got appointed into a Senate seat. I never ran for office. I wasn't interested in it. I'll tell you offline if you want to know. So my focus has been, other than fighting that binding caucus, which I do have a bill to make that illegal, so we don't do that anymore, has been on the big things. And kind of like JFK said, we choose to go to the moon not because it is easy, but because it is hard. I have not filed bills other than that legislative session movement, which is a pretty easy one, although you get a lot of resistance because they don't want to move it, because they don't want to be accountable to you, is judicial reform, how we select our judges, because I think that's very important, because right now the Alaska Bar Association chooses our judges. That's kind of a big deal. A trade organization shouldn't be doing that. Oh, that's a staffer. Kevin, that's you. That's it right there. The staff should do that. Boy, that's donuts, by the way, for a big signal. On Kevin, by the way. I'm Mr. Election Integrity. For those that are aware of that, I was called all kinds of nasty names by the Anchorage Daily News and other people because I filed a bill for trying to change our voting system and make it tighter. There's a whole bunch of problems with it. So I'm that guy. And I was called a white supremacist and a racist and all kinds of other nasty names. But oh well, that's the price to pay, I guess, for doing politics. I was a critical part, which I am pleased to say that in 2019 with Senator Hughes up here, we were the two on the conference committee that finally repealed SB 91, so that soft on crime bill, that was a big deal to me, so that's finally gone. So we got rid of that one, which is a positive. That was a win. And the other stuff would be related to, for example, the permanent fund dividend. The fiscal policy that we have, there's a comprehensive policy, that's what I believe. So if we're going to solve this problem, it's got to be in part of the plan. Because if you just do the dividend, or you just do the constitutional spending cap, or you just do taxes, or just cuts, we've seen repeatedly that does not work. I was part of the reductions when Governor Dunleavy vetoed for almost $500 million. And you would have thought the world was going to stop spending and the children were going to get thrown off the plant. I remember people talking like they were going to wheel grandma out of the seniors home over the cliff because we had vetoed about $500 million. The budget has essentially doubled since around 2000 to 2019, right? So, but to do all of those things, we couldn't even get the votes in state to keep all those vetoes. They were all restored by the end of 2019, every one of them. I was one of about 12 legislators that stuck with them on those vetoes, trying to reduce the cost of government. And right now, as you have seen, since Governor Walker turned the state upside down by starting to arbitrarily take the permanent fund dividend, he has turned the state just literally politically upside down. We've not recovered from that since. And because of the cost, as Bert was talking about, of where we sit with the budget, I believe we have to have a comprehensive fiscal plan. And that plan includes multiple things, but it's not one or the other. And that was the key. Kevin was a part of this. I was a part of it, this fiscal policy working group last fall. And it had 7 Democrats, 5 Republicans. It should have been the other way around, but we've got leadership that's a little wonky. Just because you have a Republican majority in the legislature does not mean Republicans are going to be in control if you haven't figured that one out yet. And so we came to agreement, and I've been saying this for a couple of years, is to solve the problem, you have to do it all together. You have to have these multiple things because some people want taxes. Some people want it just via cuts. Some people want to just do the spending cap or just solve the PFD, and you don't get enough people to do it together unless you put all these parts and pieces. I'm not going to vote for taxes unless I see the cuts. I'm not going to vote for taxes unless I see a change in the constitutional spending cap so we don't overspend. I might as well just throw the money out the window. Well, we won't cap ourselves, right? And there are other people going, well, if we're going to have that spending cap, then I want to see, this program, or I want to see what the tax structure will be. So to solve the problem, to have a sustainable and stable fiscal plan, all of that needs to come together. That fiscal policy had that. We've figured out a way to do it. And I will say my last piece and then figure out what I'm missing because I'm just blah, blah, blah if you're talking now, is election integrity. We were really close to passing a good portion of that. I had to work with a Democrat because I had the conservative version of election integrity. There was a liberal version of non-election integrity filed by a House Democrat. And we both realized in 2021 neither one was going to pass the other body. So Chris Tuck was the Democrat I worked with, who's a very moderate Democrat, very reasonable to work with. We said, what can we get rid of? And we got rid of the things on either side that we knew wouldn't pass the other body, and him and I agreed on the things in the middle. And they were important things like cleaning up the voter rolls. They're highly overinflated. Did you know that there's 730,000 Alaskans, and that when I queried the Division of Elections Director in front of the committee, because I'm in a majority, because there was a majority control of the Senate Republicans, so I'm the State Affairs Committee Chairman. So we had her in front of the committee. And I knew the numbers, so I'm not a lawyer, but I know how lawyers work, right? You know the answers to questions usually before you ask them if you want to have a good interrogation. I used to be an interrogator in the Air Force years ago. So I asked the question, it's like 730,000 Alaskans, 130,000 are under 18. Yes, so that's 600,000 Alaskans left. Every one of those are eligible to vote, right? Yes. I'm like, okay, if that's the case, can you explain to me the 14,500 felons right off your own page that says they're not eligible to vote, the 84,000 non-citizens and the 24,000 non-residents. That's about 124,000 people. I'm showing maybe 470,000 people eligible to vote. I'll get back to you on that one. Don't tell me there's not a problem. So there are many things like that, but cleaning up the voter rolls, having ballot tracking, ballot curing, forensic checks were an important part of these things we were trying to move that we needed for this election, and we were within 30 minutes of passing it, and we got shanghaied by alleged legal. That's a whole other story. We believe we were undercut. And I did that with 3 Democrats. Me, the Republican, with 3 Democrats. We almost got that passed. So we can work with anybody, folks, if they will help us, if we do the right thing. But the point is to get something done here, you can compromise on a bill, structure of a bill, what's in the content of the bill, without compromising your principles. And that's maybe a key thing. I think we've seen a lot of that. Kevin kind of talked about that, Representative McCabe, that sometimes people are unfairly put in context if you work with a Democrat. Oh my goodness, this is a terrible thing. No, it's not. Sometimes you can work with them to take a step forward where we all agree. There are other times where I'm looking at them and go, don't even talk to me. And if you want to look at my voting record in the Senate, there's sometimes I voted with Democrats, sometimes I voted with Republicans. There's been 3 or 4 times where I was the only name in red. Because I go, they're all wrong. Because I'm trying to go where the issue is. I'm an issues-based guy. I'm not a party guy. Anybody that knows my records, watched or paid attention, that's my deal. I'm going where I think it's best for the citizens of the state and the state. Why Michelle and I are sitting in this seat right now is not because we want to. It's not because, hey, I'm jumping up there, woohoo, I'm a politician, yay, me, and I'm going to go to Juneau for 4 more months of my life in the wintertime where it's dark and miserable. No. But I have kids and grandkids that are born here and live here. Michelle and I have lived most of our life. That's the reality. I want them to inherit something from us that is going to be vital, that's going to be free, that's going to be something where they can live and raise their kids and they want to stay here. It's got a good education system, good transportation system, blah, blah, blah. Blah, 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 so we have to talk. Last piece. I know I said that I lied. One more. I'm a politician, right? My wife said, stop being a politician. Like, what does that mean? So, there is more help coming for the MATSU for roads. That's very important to people right now. You need to understand that. In the current budget, and there may be questions about that. I could have some answers if Bert asked the question of me again. We added $30 million to the road system that was matched. So we had about $60 million extra because there was more money coming. And the MATSU has been kind of cut out of the process for many years. Governor Walker did it before, and the current finance co-chair that's been there for 4 years has cut a lot of money out of us and taken stuff out of our districts very unfairly. It's part of why I've been fighting them so hard, kind of butting heads with them. Evan in his office has as well. And I told him, I said, no more. I said, we've got potholes, we've got issues with roads. We are the fastest growing and perhaps the only growing part of the state while other parts are shrinking, and we're getting the money cut. It's not good. You go to Fairbanks, everybody's been Fairbanks, right? Most people have. You ever seen what their downtown looks like? They got 4-lane highways everywhere. We're sitting here on Bogart and Selden Road, 2-lane, and it looks like the 405 in Los Angeles. Look at what was going on with KGB. Finally, it's in the process of being paid. Look at mine after the earthquake. Look at Big Lake Road. It's all over the place. And on my district, by the way, because Kevin is fortunate enough to have half of it, it's twice the size. It's literally the size of West Virginia. So I go all the way from Whittier to Valdez to Glen Allen to Delta Junction, all the way through the Matsu, back up to almost Canada, on the other side. So there's a lot to take and cover. And guess what gets us to all those places? Roads, bridges. You should see some of the stuff driving to Valdez if you haven't been there lately. So there's help coming. I talked to the governor last week. He did a tour with DOT up here. They know that we've got the money, plus the IG money coming from the federal government. It's funny money, I get it, but they're sending it anyways. My point is, if they're going to send it to us, we might as well turn it into concrete and steel and get something out of it before it goes away, and it will be useful for us. Is that the focus will be from Department of Transportation on the Matsu, on our roads, and moving money this way because we need the infrastructure, and we need it bad. And my daughter lived down in KGB, because I had one guy say, well, you don't care about KGB. Well, first of all, this is a new district for us folks. We weren't down here. My focus has been on the north third of the Matsu, and then going up the west side and all the way to the, way out to Valdez, Delta Junction, etc. This district, I don't represent it yet. If I'm reelected, you guys choose to send me back, then this will be a part of my district. It's the redistricting, it's new. But the governor has promised us, and of course he lives up here in the Matsu too, and Department of Transportation knows this is an issue. The focus is going to start being on the Matsu and the roads, and the STIP, and a lot of these projects are in there. And more of them are going to be added because we finally have the money that we haven't had for 4 years since I've been there. I know that was a question you had before. All right, I'm going to kind of stop there and make a look at my wife with eyeballs to see if there's anything I forgot. And that was almost 20 minutes, so longer than I wanted, but I know there's good questions. And I know it's important for me to tell you who I am, what I stand for. I'm a constitutionalist. I'm very conservative. I am Republican. We live here. This is our home. I have a vested interest in what matters and what happens here because my kids and grandkids live here, and that's why we're doing the job. So, with that being said, I'll stop and start with questions.
If you have a constitutional convention, doesn't that open it up for everything bad as well? And if that's the case, with all the way that the politics has been swinging in our country, is it worth the risk at this time?
Great question. So he's opened the door for me to talk about the Constitutional Convention, but I will not talk for the next 30 minutes because I did School of Government for Mayor DeVries about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, and then we were there for a couple hours. So you're going to get lucky. You're going to get the abbreviated version. A couple things. Number one, you control the process, and that's important for people to understand. You vote whether we have one. That's number one. Your second vote is you control the delegates. You will vote for the delegates up or down, whoever they are. It can be any of you. They will be voted in just like the political system we have now all across the state by districts and regions. So you control who goes to the convention. And then the final and important, maybe the most important vote is if we actually have a convention, those delegates, if they actually pass anything, it has to go before you at the next general election for an up or down vote. So if something crazy comes out of it, like let's say, oh, they're going to take the guns. No, they're not. If they do something silly like that, we're going to vote it down. I know we will. So the people control the process. That's number one. The second part of it is I've heard the dark money coming in, the stuff that you're talking about from down south. You're going to see all these people flood it. I don't believe that. I think that is what I generally see about the Constitutional Convention from the opponents is fear of change, of what could happen. And you have to realize that, for example, I said this earlier to somebody today, if you think the Matsu is going to elect 9 liberals to send them to the Constitutional Convention, you're crazy. We're going to send 9 conservatives. Juneau is going to send 3 liberals. Half of Anchorage is going to send liberals, half is going to be conservative. Kenai is going to send conservatives. It's going to be very similar to what your current legislature looks like today. And you go, oh my goodness, well then it's going to be dysfunctional. Kinda. That's not a bad thing because it's not going to be far left, it's not going to be far right. That's not how the structure will work. But here's the difference. It takes 2/3 of the legislative body to pass a constitutional amendment. At the convention, it only takes 50% plus 1. So it lowers the bar enough that if there's something like, and I believe that the 2 primary things would be the permanent fund dividend, it's going to be a low enough bar that we might be able to pass something to get that taken care of in the Constitution so we're done fighting about it, it's off the books, it goes away forever, and we don't touch it anymore. And the second one I think would get some traction is going to be the constitutional spending cap because there's already one in there, but it's irrelevant. Currently it allows us to spend like this. We've never even gotten close to that limit. I've talked to people like Fritz Pettyjohn that were here in the early 80s that was a part of that movement, and he said they laughed even when they put it in. He's like, we know it's never going to be anything. They just wanted to say they did one. All of the other stuff, I think, is what I would call niche issues. It's going to be stuff that doesn't have the imagination of the people. It's not going to get enough traction, in my opinion, to probably go very far, because you're going to have left and the right as a relative balance inside the middle out of this. So that's another part of it. And I will be, maybe my final pitch on this for a couple minutes is that what I hear again from the people that are opposing it, they are big union leaders. They're big business leaders. They are special interests. They're nonprofits. That's the ones I see, and a lot of deep state bureaucrats as well. A lot of former legislators and some current ones are fighting it, and it's all fear. And you're right, it does open everything. The people that go to the convention, if we have it, those delegates have plenary power. Once they get there, they can open up everything and they can talk about anything they want, but they still got to get it passed. It's got to go through committees, get vetted, get voted, and then the people have to approve it anyways. So, yes, they could. I don't believe those things will happen because of how the structure will be set up and who will go to it. But what I have, and this is my pitch to you, is not fear to offer you. What I have is faith and hope. I have faith that the people that go there will do the right thing because I believe and trust in Alaskans, and I hope that they will go there and fix the problems that your legislature has shown itself incapable of or absolutely never going to want to solve. And I think that the people might have to do that for us so that we can move forward. So long answer, I know, but it's a great question because it's something that's on a lot of people's minds, and you're going to have to vote for it. It will be on the ballot every 10 years. And finally, I will tell you, when you look at the changes of this state, from the good people up here that are the blue-collar workers, what the flavor of this state is kind of centered to right a little bit, we're changing hands about 40,000 people a year. There's only 730,000 people in Alaska. The people we're losing, they're the good people that are conservative, they're blue-collar workers, they're going to Texas and Florida and Louisiana where the grass is greener, and who's moving up to this state are people from California, Oregon, and Washington, those that are kind of anti-resource development. Kevin talked a little bit about the mine and some other things. And my fear is 10 years from now, it's going to be too late to allow the state to develop our own resources and lock it up. I will tell you right now, with my own ears, I've heard people talk about, well, we're going to turn this into a national park. This is going to be trails. This is going to be a great place. Well, why do I oppose that? I will take this and I will step it right from local politics here to state to international, right past national, because we are a key part of the strategic defense and viability of this nation. We have some of the highest reserves and known of rare earth elements and other minerals, plus coal and natural gas and oil on the planet. On the planet. China has most of those locked up already, and they're hostile to our intent. Did you know China has about 12 and they're building more icebreakers? That nation's on the equator. It's pretty hot down there. There's no ice. You know how many we have as the U.S.? 1.5. We're building a few new ones, and we're an Arctic nation. Russia has 48, and they're building 6 brand new big ones that are nuclear powered. So we need a deep water port. We need to develop our resources. We're the state that does it responsibly. We're law and order. We're a state that we know is reliable to us. We can't lock those things up. I'm afraid that we will. So, and that was an answer to whoever asked the question. I forgot about the mining and other stuff. We do it responsibly, and we are a resource state. I'm tired of us not building things. It's like we are afraid to do anything. Watana Dam. Oh, can't build it. Something's going to happen bad. Oh, we want to build a dam here. Oh, can't do that. What about small micronuclear for some of the villages? Oh, can't do that. That's dangerous. Can't build a bridge. Can't build Kabata Bridge. We can't build a pipeline from a gas pipeline. We've spent $1 billion, but we haven't, taken one shovel of dirt out of the ground yet. Well, what the heck is our problem? What about a refinery? We shut down the North Pole. We were sending 800 million gallons a year of jet fuel, selling it to people of our product at a higher cost. You know what we do now? Zero. How come we haven't built a new refinery? Just turn our black gold into something more important, put our people to work and sell it for a higher price instead of sending it to Taiwan to refine it and bring it back. What the heck is our problem? We've lost our minds on some of this stuff, on being a nation that is not afraid to build, that is not afraid to grow. And only economic growth is going to get us out of this. I'm on a roll, sorry. Questions? Yes, sir, ma'am.
We're talking about national parks. Where does the government have a stake to manage the national park? Because the government owns nothing. That's all public lands.
You are correct. The federal government has over 60% of the lands of the state. About another 30+% is owned by the state. Some of it by native tribes, etc., corporations, and I believe about 1.5% is in what would be called private ownership.
Native is still the people. The government is not supposed to own anything. You're not supposed to operate as a corporation. Period.
So you are talking about, and we can go back in time to when the state was entered into an agreement, if you will, with the federal government. I wasn't around then, but talking to the people that were. The Federal government promised us that we would have most of that land given back. That promise has been broken. That's never been pursued aggressively. The federal government has blown us off.
On that one, the state was settled 2 years ago.
Well, my point is we don't have it back. The lands. We have not been given those
It was
lands.
settled 2 years ago by the Alaskans.
I got you. Okay. Yeah, I'm talking about the fact that they owe us our lands and they have not given them back to us to develop.
That was going to be my next question. If us Alaskan people all get together, are you going to back us against the federal government to get us our land back?
Without question. It's not even, why wouldn't I do that? It's our land. It was supposed to be given to us from the beginning. They've kept it.
And I have another question. You were talking about the criminals and stuff like that. Isn't it, no matter who you are, except for if you're an illegal immigrant or whatever, shouldn't you, even though you're in jail, shouldn't you still have that right to vote, your opinion on who you feel should be in that office?
Yes, but we have rules as a nation that we've said, for example, if you're a non-resident, you're not supposed to be able to vote. If you're a non-citizen, you're not supposed to be able to vote. If you go to Iraq or Mexico or any other country, you're not allowed to vote in there. But there are people that want to do that here. And so we have to check
Why
that.
can't our inmates who are in jail, why can't they vote?
Most of them can. But there is a certain category of felons that are not allowed by law to vote right now. I'd have to look it up. It's 14,500 roughly. I can tell you that was the last number about 2 years ago. That are classified as, and I think they were like Class A and unclassified felons, like the worst ones. They're not allowed to vote. And I've got a guy that was doing the judicial stuff here as a lawyer that could probably answer better. But there's 14, most of them can vote. But there's a certain class that can't based on the severity of their crime.
Okay, so there are a few people that have like theft or misdemeanors and have done time in jail and they're being told they can't even register to vote.
No, that shouldn't be true. Most of those people are allowed to vote. They should be. And if you have specific cases of it, tell us. We've had people write to us, we've had to investigate that.
Well, one of them happens to be my son who's sitting in Anchorage right now. And he goes, Mom, I can't vote, they won't let me. I'm like, well, I'm going to a meet and greet and I will find out why they're saying we can't
Well,
vote.
if you don't mind saying, what was the level of this crime? You don't say what it
It was
was.
theft.
But was it like just a misdemeanor, misdemeanor A and
I think it's a class B or C, I'm not real sure.
B, felony or misdemeanor?
Felony.
So somewhere in there's a line. I don't know what it is about when he would be allowed to vote and not, and then for how long he served before he would fall off that list and be allowed to vote again.
Okay.
So there is, it could be legitimate that in the current statutes he can't vote, but I'd have to look up specifically what it is. We saw this when we were in our election bill, because we were trying to make sure that that was tight. It wasn't so much the felon part of it or a criminal that was convicted. It was about non-residents, non-citizens, etc., that we know were voting, because many of them were turning in under automatic voter registration, applying for the PFD, and then they were automatically being registered to vote even if they weren't eligible to be eligible. I said that twice. They weren't eligible to vote because they were accepting it prima facie. Oh, okay, well, you register for the PFD, you get to vote. Well, that's not the case, because the PFD was denying them later because of whatever reason, non-resident, felon, you name it, but they were being allowed to vote and sent the ballots, and it's caused a big problem. We're trying to get rid of that. If that answers the question. If there's more stuff, you can talk to Sean, and we'll take that specifically, for sure. Did I answer your question, too? Enough? Kind of? Yeah, we can talk after, so don't slow it down. Ask it again. Bert, I know you were coming. But I know you. I want to make sure these people I don't know are asking questions of the new guy that may be here before I get to you. Anybody else so far? Kevin, something? All right, Bert, you're up.
Okay, last night they had a very good presentation on ranked choice voting. Get to use it for the first time here on the 16th, again in the November ballot for everybody that's in this primary. You guys, this next legislative session are going to get a chance to possibly be able to eliminate that, change it, and everything else because it'll hit its 2-year mark since it's been passed. The big question I have is, and after getting to answer my one burning question last night that I've had since the beginning of this, it was supposed to be 51% or 50 plus 1 to actually win the election. I was under the informed last night, pretend there's 100 voters. 70 of the people rank the top 2 vote getters, but 30 of those people didn't rank the top 2 vote getters at all. So there's only 70 votes in the end that get counted. And I was informed last night that it's 51% of those remaining 70 that determines who the vote goes to. And it would only make a difference if it was like 35 to 35 people in the end, because then it's a split vote down the middle. Then it would have to go to a runoff. So if someone had 45 and the other one only had 25, they're counting that as 51% of the entire
In the
vote
next
sitting
round,
there.
right? Does it go to round 2, round 3?
Round 2, round 3, yeah. Whatever's left at the very end, that's where the 51% gets total. So there's only 70 votes that made it to the final round.
So that is, and please, for the love of all things good, don't hold me to this, because we held a committee meeting on this back in February on ranked choice voting and all the stuff, trying to understand it. 5 senators, a bunch of reps, a couple other senators, the Division of Elections Director, a Maine Policy Fellow Institute, because they had ranked choice voting in Maine that kind of didn't go well. He was online with us. We called him in. We had a bunch of other experts and people on there. Hour-and-a-half committee hearing. When it was over, most of us were still scratching our heads and going, how's that work again? So I am frustrated that I know that the people that are going to show up and vote, most of the citizenry are not going to know. They're not going to have spent time thinking about it. They're going to show up and go, here's your ballot. My wife, Michelle, she's a poll worker. They're going to get tons of questions because they go, how's this work? And what is this engineering chart I'm looking at with 5 bubbles and names and all? Oh my goodness. It can be confusing even if you spend time thinking about it. 50% plus 1 is not necessarily the answer, because at the last round, let's say there's 3 rounds of it, whoever gets the most votes, and it can be 40% to 30%, whatever's left, they win. So it doesn't have to be 50% plus 1. That's only if you ever hit a round where that person gets 50% plus 1, then it's over, they win. So yes, it could go to a 3rd round, which is probably you're going to have a 3rd round, there's 4 people, and then whoever has the most votes wins as they fall off. So I think that is correct, Bert. I just don't want to be held 100%.
So basically 30% of the voters out of those 100 are
that.
disenfranchised because they didn't even pick the top winners to begin with.
Correct. That's as I understand it. And I will tell you this from a perspective of having done a lot of digging into this. Ranked choice voting, and we had a professor of a PhD guy back from Stanford or Princeton. He has the most exhaustive report on this. He did a long study, and he's done all the RCV events across the nation for the last 20 years. San Francisco has it, Maine and others. Now we do top 4. Nobody else has done top 4. We're the only state to try that coming up here. We haven't done it yet. And the average disenfranchisement rate is 11%. So if we had 400,000 people in the last election, that means we're going to probably toss out 44,000 Alaskans' votes aren't going to count. I don't know how anybody can justify that this is a good system. And by the way, furthermore, and even more troubling to me, is that within that data, he said that it is educated whites, mostly, I'm going to say right out of his report, tend to have the lowest disenfranchisement rate based on understanding it, educated, whatever. And the ones that are disenfranchised at the highest rate are minorities, English as a second language, the least educated amongst us, like not high school graduates, and senior citizens. They get disenfranchised sometimes as high as 25 or higher percent. So you think of a system where we just enacted it by Alaskans for Better Elections and others to get a certain person elected at the U.S. Senate level, because that's kind of, they've admitted that's why they did it. They've actually said it. I've heard it with my own ears. And you're going to disenfranchise up to a quarter of the native vote, of the black vote, of the senior citizen vote, and you're going to sit here and try to justify this is a good system? I already, just so you know, I haven't told anybody this yet, first time I'm saying it openly, I already have the ranked choice voting repealer ready to go, and I believe it's going to be Senate Bill 1 if I go back, and I'm getting rid of that stupid thing, and we're going back to what we had before. Just so you know. Okay, just one? I get off easy.
Well, you kind of touched on the other 2, so.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I just want to add on to his question on this ranked choice voting. I read into it before it hit ballot. This was submitted by a nonprofit in Colorado. How did they be able to fund that, put it on our ballot? How is an outside entity allowed to put this in our state, because they've already messed up Maine? I'm from Maine, they messed up Maine. And they've done it in Colorado, they flipped Colorado. They've helped Obama because they funded most of his campaigns. The agency that did it, I forgot the name of it, but you know what I'm talking about. Why can't we create our own bill to get rid of this right now? I mean, let's pull up our own money to write this on the ballot?
This is a good question. So we're covering some very important topics. These are probably 2 of the most germane to us today is the Constitutional Convention question, because it's coming. Whether it's support or not, we'll have whatever we want. The citizens will decide. And ranked choice voting, because it's getting ready to hit you right in the face. It's like the coyote in the old cartoons. It's the light at the end of the tunnel, except it's a train, right? It's about to run us over. It's going to be interesting. And for those that paid attention of the primary that we had for Don Young when he passed away, that we had a couple, last month, I think the rejection rate, I was going to say disenfranchisement, that's what it is. The rejection rate was about 9%, maybe 10 or 11 ballpark. We're already seeing that number trickle up to what the national average is. And now that was simple. That was just pick one name out of the 48 available to you. Just fill in one bubble, and the top 4 vote getters go on to the general election, which will be on the 16th of August for that one seat. That's the primary coming up. And by the way, please get out and vote. I'll talk about that in a second. Here in about less than 2 weeks. Go vote, all right? That's just where you get to pick one bubble per race. When you go to the general election, then you've got to pick and rank choice. Well, that's my first choice. This was my second choice. I could do a third choice and a fourth choice. I could do it right, and I went, that's where it gets really, ooh, this is interesting. And what about, oh, well, there's 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. I'm Republicans. I don't want to vote for the Democrats. Should I put down 1 and 2 choice, or should I put in a third? So I'm saying, you know, I've got a race. There's 2 of us. You could just put one bubble. That's fine. We're going to know the results of that on the first night. There's not going to be a second or a third round. I'm saying all this not to confuse you, because I want you to go vote and I want you to do your best. But what happened is it was dark money that came from out of state, like you're talking about. It was an entity created inside the state, Alaskans for Better Elections. It was Scott Kendall was one of the primary, along with Jason Grin, he's a legislator, and some others, that brought this thing into, and in their own words, it was to get Lisa Murkowski reelected. If you support her, that's fine. I'm not here to talk about the politics of that. But that was why they did it, because they knew the Republican Party in Alaska was not going to endorse her. She wasn't going to win the primary, so she would be kicked out. And they wanted to keep her. So this was a way to do it, because now there is no primary. She goes right on to the general election. She's going to be there and has a chance to win and go back. All right, whatever. That's politics, right? But they sold it to you as dark money. It was this lightning and the dark, and it was scary and all that. There was 26 provisions in that bill covering a whole host of topics. There is a law that says you can only have single subject when you do these types of initiatives. There was a whole bunch of them. Instead of the courts ruling, remember I talked about judicial selection again, constitutionalists that rule the right way. They said, no, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. 26 different sections. That's not single subject. They did it anyways, so it was on the ballot. It passed by about 3,900 votes, so barely, like less than 1%. But that's, I think, the people were sold a lie. They heard dark money. They didn't really think about this ranked choice voting thing, and they rarely talked about that. They didn't spend a lot of time talking about this ranked choice voting and the complication of it and how hard and how many people it was going to disenfranchise. They didn't care. It was designed for a reason. Now we're stuck with it. We're stuck with it for 2 years. After this election cycle, you can repeal it as the people with your own initiative, do whatever you want, because you have the right to do that constitutionally. The legislature can repeal it, which I plan on trying to do myself, and that the results will tell us how this goes here in a couple months. But that's the options. We as the legislature cannot touch it for 2 years after the people pass it. We're stuck until after this election cycle. So I think how it was sold was not ethical. I think it was interesting that they said they wanted to get rid of dark money, but they used dark money from out of the state to actually do the campaign on it. And one little gotcha, this is hilarious. The people that talked about the dark money and trying to prevent it, and that's how they scared you into voting for it. What they didn't tell you was they left out of that law when it was passed that they can use all the dark money they want for more initiatives from out of state moving forward. They can still do it. You didn't know that because they didn't tell you that. So, anyways.
But when it passed, I couldn't believe it. I was like, you guys didn't read this? I don't think nobody read it when they said yes.
And honestly, I say myself, as well as others, because I did not pay, most of us, including citizens, did not pay enough attention to this soon enough, did not realize the momentum and the money that was being spent and where it was. Had we realized a year ahead of time, we probably could have killed it and fought it. But honestly, I even look at it myself and I go, I'm an idiot. I can't believe I did not catch this and fight harder to stop it and go out and tell people like ballot measure 1 trying to kill the oil industry, go, stop this thing, it's terrible. I got it now, day late, $1 short. So I apologize to you guys as well. We all should have caught this and said, whoa, stop this thing, this is not good. But they did a good job of keeping it real quiet and scaring people with dark money. That's how it passed. And these things happen. And a final point to that, and I'll get to the other question, is that we are a small state, population-wise, and we're really, really easy to influence with just a little bit of money. And that's why they pick on us. You may notice there's a lot of these things that come to Alaska. When you got 40 million people in California, and it costs tens of millions of dollars to run an initiative, that's a tough sell. But you can go to Alaska, and you can do SB 91, that soft on crime bill, and you can pass that sucker and then show the rest, oh, look, Alaska's doing it, because you know why I know that? Because in Colorado, the guy that was the Department of Corrections commissioner that brought it to us, Governor Walker, and Dean Williams, he brought that up here. He's a guy that came up from California, a very left-wing, progressive guy on crime, soft on crime stuff. He gave us that. We repealed it, thank goodness, in 2019, but you know where he went? because Michelle's family's down there. He went to Colorado. He's enacted an SB 91 in Colorado. They're dealing with it right now. I've been talking to like their House Minority Pack, giving him the data, trying to feed him. If you get rid of that thing, you don't want it. Trust me, it's bad. That's how they do it, because we're small and we can be influenced by just a little bit of money, and then they can spread that across the rest of the country. Go, see, we already did it. That gives you a little background into it. I've learned a lot in 5 years. It's been like a fire hose effect. Yes, sir.
Another issue that's going to hit us really hard up here in Alaska is the move for native sovereignty for making reservations. Every time, these guys meet me at the store and want me to sign the petition. I always ask to see their Alaska driver's license. I ask them at the fair. All these people and all these petitions they're not from here. They live to your position on native sovereignty. If allowed to move forward, how would you address it, or how are you going to prevent it?
So there was a bill that just came out that was signed. Actually, it was only a bill signed I went to us by last week. I think it was last week. House Bill 123. And you're going to first, why am I saying this? Because it was a bill that was tribal recognition, not sovereignty, but tribal recognition. Most other states have recognized, and because the federal government recognized the tribes a long time ago, there's 229 of them in Alaska, believe it or not. I finally found a real answer this last session going through this bill. And there's about 530, something like that in the whole country. Almost half of the tribes in the United States are in Alaska. That's how small, and they're set up that way. So the bill, though, was to recognize those tribes just like the federal government. It does not change the relationship of the state or the liability of the state, only saying we recognize the tribes exist, that's it. This is going to, because of what you're saying, listen to this one. So that bill, when it flew through the House, right, controlled by Democrats, and it was given to the Senate, I got it early back in like February of this year. The Senate President McCabe, and another senator were up there. They had given it 2 committees. Remember what Kevin said about if you give it 2 committees, you want it to move. If you give it 3, 4, 5, you're trying to kill it, right? They gave it 2 committees. They pulled me up to the dais on the Senate floor. And they said, hey, Mike, we're going to waive this out of CRNA, and we're just going to give you it state affairs, and we want you to have a hearing on it and move it, like tomorrow. I'm like, whoa, what is that? We don't do that. Why you want? Oh, we want to use the bill, and it's really innocuous. I'm like, yeah, I trust somebody when they tell me that, right? Down there in Juneau. Oh, don't trust us. Trust us on this, right? I'm like, no, I don't. Fingers crossed, right? The whole thing. So I said, well, that's not right. Why are you trying? I'm not going to do that. Well, we'd really like to move fast. All right, I'll take a look at it. We didn't move that bill for over 2 months. We heard it. We had 8, 9 meetings on it, committee hearings, which you never do. And hours of testimony from Indian tribal lawyers, Indian lawyers from down south, Native lawyers, Department of Law, Ledge Legal. There's a reason I'm saying all this. Because the section they put it in was land and water jurisdiction. And we're like, whoa, what does that have to do with tribal record? So, and who was writing it was a very savvy lawyer from down south who go, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to get by us, right? That was the thought process where we were concerned. There were red flags. I had legislators in the House, Democrat and Republican, that voted for it in the House because it passed almost unanimously, who came up to me and said, Mike, kill it, we don't like it. I'm like, you want me to take this on the chin, and why didn't you vote no? They almost all voted yes. I'm like, okay, fine, I'll slow it down. We'll take a look at this. Scott Ogan, who's my staffer, I don't know if anybody in here knows him, some of you do, former state legislator, he works for me. And he looked at this, and at first he goes, no, absolutely not, there's no way this is going to unravel the state, et cetera, et cetera. All right? And there were other people saying it's absolutely harmless, it's not going to do anything. So over the course of 2 months, we moved it to its own section. We took some of the language, we codified all of the discussion of, hey, it's not going to affect anything, no liability changes, no nothing. Some people were very unhappy about that, which is why I knew we're getting close to a good target, because when everybody starts getting mad at it, that's probably the best compromise you're going to have, right? One side is not unhappy and the other side is happy. That's usually a bad thing, often. So it was a very long process where we learned a lot about what it meant to them to be recognized. But we also put the protection in to know we weren't going to unravel the state. Now, I said all that to explain my position on why tribal sovereignty can be a problem. Because I believe where tribal sovereignty is going to lead us is to unravel the state into 230 individual nation states, and then there is no more state of Alaska. That would be untenable to me. And I've talked to people in Alaska Federation of Natives and others that go, they don't want that either. The leaders and many of the senior ones, there are some that really want that, and I get it. Everybody's got their thing. But a lot of them are like, oh my goodness, if we do that, this is just going to become a nightmare. And then, 230 nation states, and that's not going to work. So that to me would be a problem, and I don't think I can support that path. I can support recognition. I can support working with compacting and as a team together, because we all live here, and how we're going to work between the money from the federal government and between the state and the tribes and the corporations. We have to do that. We all live here, right? We've got to work together. But I think sovereignty is something that would be very difficult because of what that would do to us. And I will tell you, I think there's a lot of Native Alaskans that would agree with that. They're very concerned about that path. So I hope that, again, a long answer, but there was a whole thing about that this session, this last year, that played out. And I just ended up, by virtue of who I was and that committee chairman, I was very involved in that process to include going and speaking to them at the bill signing, because I think it's very important that we work together. We're a team, we're not enemies, but we have to be careful from unraveling this state because then nothing's going to exist. I don't know how it would work.
The question is more to the line of they're trying to get it on the ballot so that the citizens vote on it, and it would be very deceptive. And everybody, just like you, oh, it's awesome, they deserve to be seen and heard. But then it would be just like ranked choice voting. And then it may be not as easy to undo.
So this bill that I'm talking about is more germane based on your question. That was the one that they were speaking of this year. That was the one they were going to put on the ballot. One of the reasons we moved that bill, ultimately, not the only reason, but one of the reasons, and this came right from like AFN and others, that you might think, oh, they're all for tribal, sovereignty and other stuff. Many of them were not because they're concerned where that takes us. This tribal recognition bill was supposed to be on an initiative on the ballot this fall. And by passing that bill of substantively, if I said that word right, it's a long word, that's the same as what the initiative is, then it kills the initiative. And that bill was passed that's essentially the same as that, but with those protections of how we modified it, but all the substance is the same. Department of Law, Ledge Legal, everybody's already verified that. So what we effectively did was take away the chance for them to try to sneak that in via initiative, which even many AFN leaders were very nervous of because they knew they might some of the more militant ones might take that down a path that could really become problematic. What we passed as a bill doesn't do that. It protects the state as far as where it is. It doesn't change the relationship, but it recognizes the tribes that you exist. I'm fine with that because they do. But it was the other part that was troublesome. So that was not just me. I just learned that by being the guy that's chairman to slow it down and take the time to learn. But there was a lot of concern, even from the Native community, of where that was going to take us. So many of them understood that as a problem. Hope that answers your question. You just happened to ask one that was a big deal this year, more than I thought it would be. My wife's looking at me and gave me the time thing. It's 9:20, so we've been going for an hour and 20 minutes. So other questions, who I am, bills we're working on, important stuff, whatever. Anyone? Bueller? Everybody in this crowd's old enough to know that movie. I know you've seen it. Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Come on, you got that one. That's how I roll. Okay, well, I know Kevin's going to stay. I will certainly stay after and talk. We appreciate your time. Thank you again for opening this up. Our ability to answer questions and be here matters. Michelle and I will stay around. I know there's lots of campaign stuff. We would love your support if you like what we're doing. We certainly could use your help. We could use your help on social media, telling your friends that, hey, these guys have the right attitude and mindset about things and would support us because there's a lot to be done. And I think we are right on the cusp of solving some things that will put this state into the right mindset and on autopilot so that we can move forward on things and stop fighting about it. And I know Kevin is as interested in those things as I am. So we're hopeful. We're excited to get to know the new district. Hope we're going to go back and do these things. We'll stay after. And thanks for coming out on a Friday night of all things in the summer. And we appreciate your time.
All right, thank you all for being here tonight. It was greatly appreciated. Do not forget to like and share and help me make more of these by going to our website, Politadick.com, clicking that support button, and all proceeds go right back into making sure I can do more of these events on a daily basis. This is one election year that we cannot be slacking on. We need people like me out there filming this stuff, live streaming it to all of you so that you guys can all be well-informed voters this election season and also keep up with what they do once they're elected down in Juneau. I can make that happen. Your support is what makes that possible. So again, go to Politadick.com and click that support button. Don't forget to like and share. This broadcast today was brought to you by supporters like you. You guys all have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you tomorrow at the meet and greet candidates in Willow, Alaska. They are going to be at the library there, and there's supposed to be food trucks and vendors and everything else, and every candidate running in the valley is supposed to show up tomorrow. It's a good opportunity to be able to meet them if you haven't before. So I'll have a great night.